Yeah, but the problem is,
We do a little bit of television.
Where are they going to go? Where are they going to come from?
Still require somebody on air. Now we don't do that. We just do packages.
time is pretty flat.
Where are they going?
Good afternoon. Let me start with a brief announcement that is not directly related to Kosovo. As you know, for the last year or two, the Pentagon has been working aggressively on ways to make its computer systems more secure. And as part of that continuing effort, there will probably be a brief interruption in the Pentagon's connection to the Internet, probably today, while we install new Internet access that provides some more firewalls. That is, more barriers against intrusive entry by others who might want to come in and mess around with our systems. As you probably read, there have been a number of cases throughout the government over the last couple of weeks where people have come in and defaced web pages, home pages, etc. And one of the things we want to do is make that much more difficult. So in line with that, we will have a brief interruption probably this afternoon. Could be after the close of business, and then we'll be up and running again. So, yes.
Are the firewalls a direct result of those hacks, or was this always intended to happen, and have you changed the timing at all because of that?
This is part of a plan that's been going on for some time. We obviously have been watching what's been happening in other government agencies, and we are responding to that, but it's also part of something that we've been developing for some time. There's a comprehensive plan that'll be going on, and this is just one aspect of it.
So, Defense Link, is that what you're doing?
It'll be Defense Link. It'll be all the Internet access from the Defense Department.
How long will it be down?
It'll be very short. It'll basically be changing from one entry point to another through through the DISA, which is Defense Information Security Agency. And it could all be done in an hour, as I understand it. Now, I'm not an expert on this, so I can only tell you what I've been told. I can't explain this firsthand. Yes?
How many successful hacks have there been that have defaced DoD web pages?
I don't know the answer to that question, but we'll try to get it. No, it has not been a major problem. This is much more protective than reactive. It's looking to the future to prevent the types of problems that other agencies.
Also have some, because of the problems in the Energy Department, this also is related to that, I would presume?
Well, it's relating to the same problem that the Energy Department's been dealing with. It's been trying to protect our websites from having the same types of interference that other government websites have had.
Change the subject?
Sure.
A couple of things. Number one, has the military committee set a total for K4 yet? And has the United States decided how many troops going to offer for K4?
The military committee began the process today of the Force Generation Conference. It usually takes a couple of days. It isn't complete yet. Our government will have something to say about U.S. participation soon, but not today.
So you haven't decided yet? Do you still stand by the 14 to 15%?
It'll be in that range. It'll be about 15% of the total.
You said for 7,000. You think it might be still 7,000 or smaller or perhaps larger than that?
I think the government will have more to say about this very soon, and it'll become clear then. But I wouldn't drive you away from about the 15% range.
One other thing. Can I ask what country the Secretary is in today?
He's here. He's here, Charlie. In fact, he was in Woodbridge, Virginia earlier today and covered by many of your colleagues out there.
You know, we covered this on Saturday. We protested about it on Saturday. Why didn't the SecDef, why didn't you tell us that the SecDef had gone to Britain on Thursday? And if not on Thursday, when he left, why not late Thursday or on Friday and give us a rundown of what he'd done?
I read the transcript of the Saturday briefing, and I thought Captain Doubleday handled it very well, and I really have nothing to add.
Well, Captain Doubleday said that it was part of the ongoing consultations with the Allies.
That's correct.
Paraphrasing, the ongoing consultations with the Allies on NATO. So you're not announcing, I mean, you tell us if he has telephone conversations with the Allies, you generally tell us that at a briefing. Why not if he travels?
Oh, I don't. I frequently don't tell you. He has telephone conversations almost daily with his colleagues, and I mention them in a generic term that he's in frequent contact with his colleagues, but I don't tell you every day that he's spoken to Minister Richard or Minister Sharping, Minister Scolamio, or any other defense ministers, Minister Hakarep, for instance. So we don't mention those on a daily basis.
Seems only reasonable, Ken, that people who cover the Secretary every day would be interested in knowing if he's out of the country in another country.
He has meetings every day with people that we don't
I
announce.
mean, his physical
Yeah,
absence
but I
from
mean,
the country
traveling
is
to another
different.
country.
Well, I understand that you were surprised by this, but he does from time to time go visit other people and does not always announce his trips.
Well, I mean, it seems to be a trend here, Ken. I mean, the Secretary, for instance, meets foreign leaders now. He meets defense ministers regularly, and there's no longer press availabilities after he meets them. Why is that?
It's situational more than anything else, but
Situational. It's almost, I mean, it happens all the time.
I wouldn't say it
Very
happens all the
seldom.
time.
No, unless he has something to announce and they have a press conference down here. We don't have any press availabilities up in his office now when he meets visiting defense ministers.
Well, he doesn't do them in his office, as his predecessor did. He does them sometimes in his dining room, and I just don't think it's fair to say that he never has press conferences unless he has something to announce. I'd be glad to sit down and go through the record with you.
Well,
I think there have been a number of times when he's gone out there and made a brief statement about the meeting that he's had with his colleague and then answered questions.
why just when he has something to announce? Why can't we?
Well, I said
go up-
frequently he doesn't. I mean, he always makes a brief statement about the tenor of the meeting and what they discussed. When he does that, no. When he,
there.
no. When he does the press availabilities and then answers questions.
Can I ask why the change? We always, as you know, on a regular basis, we used to be able to go up and ask a couple of questions at a photo opportunity. Why the change?
A lot of it has to do with his schedule and timing generally.
Those are very brief photo opportunities, Ken. I don't think that's a valid reason for it.
Well, I think it's a
Anyway.
perfectly valid reason.
Would you ask the SecDef if he could have these more often, these availabilities?
Sure. He hasn't been visited by a lot of defense ministers recently. I think he will be visited sometime soon, and in that case, we'll try to arrange something.
For instance, tomorrow, when the Kuwaiti defense minister visits, might we have a...
I think it would be very reasonable to do something with the Kuwaiti defense minister. Yes.
Two things, obviously. You can sleep well tonight because you're protected by a triple top. Any word on the humanitarian airdrops? Have they begun? If not, any idea when they will begin?
The International Rescue Committee has announced that it will begin airdrops on June 3rd. And my understanding is that they plan to drop some leaflets tomorrow informing people that the food drops will be coming, and talking to them about the procedures for these drops and announcing some basic safety procedures, such as getting out of the way of the airdrops.
Can you give us some idea of the magnitude of the drops? You said last week up to enough HDRs to feed, I think, 15,000 people a day, but how many planes, how many flights? We're talking just within Kosovo proper, or what can you tell us?
Well, I think that the best agency to answer these questions would be the International Rescue Committee in New York, and I'd be glad to give you their contact, because these are being done by non-government organizations, not by the United States or by NATO. They have coordinated with NATO, and they will coordinate, but NATO will continue its air campaign on the days that these airdrops are made. We will do our best to deconflict NATO air operations with the airdrops. But in terms of where the food will be dropped, how much will be dropped, when it'll be dropped, I really think you should talk to the International Rescue Committee. And the contact point in New York is Ed Bly, and his number is 212-551-3114. And I'm sure that he will be able to answer your questions. I know that they are going to have a photo opportunity when the planes are loaded, when they take off, and I'm sure that they'll be glad to answer questions about the amount of food they're dropping.
One last follow-up. There's one last follow-up. Is there any change in the NATO position about flying cap or cover and the other protection for them?
There is not. There's no change. Yes.
And given the possibility of some diplomatic movement, how quickly could NATO have peacekeeping forces ready to move? How much time are we talking about here?
Well, there are already about 10,000 NATO troops in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. 12,000, excuse me, there. There are about 10,000 NATO troops now in Albania. So there are a number in the area, plus the United States does have the Marine Expeditionary Unit, the 26th MU, in the area. We also have some the Southeastern European task force in Italy that could move pretty quickly. And so if there were a need to move quickly, I think NATO would be able to do so. We hope, of course, there will be a peace agreement any minute, any hour. That's really up to Milosevic. The NATO demands are very clear. And as soon as he meets those 5 standards, we could begin helping the refugees get home.
About given what you've just laid out here, about how many troops total would that be? The 10, the 12, and the other 2 U.S. forces?
It would be, well, that's 22,000. It would be about 26,000 probably in total. But I'm not predicting that all those would move in. It would depend a lot on what the challenge is. I think that, for instance, there's going to be a huge demining challenge initially. We know that bridges and roads have been mined into Kosovo from Macedonia and Albania, some of them at any rate. So there's going to have to be attention paid to that. Clearly, we would probably want to move in some heavy forces initially to create a protective phalanx for the rest of the forces coming in. All this is what's being worked out now in NATO, and it'll take a couple of days for NATO to finish that work.
Ken, a quick follow-up on the airdrops question, then I have another subject I just want to pursue briefly. But on the airdrops, is the United States assisting in any way, such as, for instance, with intelligence, to show where perhaps the neediest displaced people are located in Kosovo, or any sort of assistance at all to this non-governmental effort?
Lieutenant General McDuffie talked about this at some length. This is a private operation that is being done without help or support from NATO, but in a way that will deconflict the private airdrops with the NATO operations, and I don't think I can say anything more about that right now. Yes?
You're talking about this as a strictly private thing, but isn't the International Rescue Committee getting some, I think it's some AID money or some U.S.
Well, they are getting
money.
some AID money, but they are the ones who are doing this themselves.
Ken, on my other subject is about Secretary Cohen's trip last week. Was there something specific that required his presence with the other ministers? Is a new issue up or anything? Or what was the purpose of his consultations?
I think it's the difference between interviewing somebody over the phone and interviewing them in person. Although he talks to his colleagues very frequently by phone, there's nothing that substitutes for eye-to-eye contact. 4 of his colleagues were meeting in Europe in preparation for a WEU Defense Ministerial. They invited him to come over and sit down and talk with them, and he did it.
Did Secretary Cohen press at these meetings for planning for a possible invasion option for NATO?
We gave a very full account of what happened at the meeting on Friday, and Captain Doubleday repeated that account on Saturday, and nothing has changed between the times we laid out the agenda of that meeting. They came away from the meeting convinced that the air campaign is working and that it should be intensified and that it will be intensified. They discussed such topics as expanding the list of targets that the Allied forces can strike. They talked about expanding the assets available for the strikes. And then they also talked about the preparation of the Peace Implementation Force, KFOR, to get it into place so it'll be ready should there be some sort of a peace agreement or compliance with NATO's 5 conditions quickly. And that's exactly what NATO's doing.
Just one last one on this. Just generally, not tied to this meeting, but just generally, does the United States favor, would the United States favor more detailed planning for possible invasion option, more detailed than the updated assessment that's going on now, so that there is, if there is a discussion of this option in the future, that there's better estimates on which to base?
Well, that's exactly what the assessment is doing. The assessment will be more detailed than the previous guesstimates that were produced by NATO back in the summer or early fall. But I think that Secretary Cohen, President Clinton have been very clear that there is a consensus right now for an air campaign. The air campaign is working. It's having increasingly a greater impact, both strategically and tactically. That strategically on the Yugoslav ability to support its military, and tactically on its ability to move or use its military in Kosovo. And I think that General Wald, who will be here in 1 minute, will be able to lay out for you once again the increasing damage that this campaign is imposing on Yugoslavia, both in Kosovo and throughout the entire country, with the exception of Montenegro, of course. So that's what they talked about, and I think it's very important to realize that this campaign, now in its 70th day, 10th week, has had the complete support and unity of NATO to this point. And the campaign has gotten systematically and progressively tougher, systematically and progressively more damaging from the very first days. And that's exactly what Secretary Cohen, what President Clinton, what General Clark, General Shelton have predicted would happen in this campaign. It's followed that. It's followed that script. And the agreement that they ratified at the meeting in Bonn on last week on Thursday was to just continue this. We believe it's working, and we believe the evidence is clearer and clearer every day that it's working.
And if one of the airdrop planes goes down, will NATO provide CSAR?
No.
Can I ask one question? Last Friday, Secretary Cohen said that General Clark was exploring other opportunities for the Apaches in Albania. Those were his words, exploring other opportunities. Do you know what he meant by that?
General Clark is always exploring ways to use additional assets. And there have always been a number of possible ways to use the Apaches.
What are some of the opportunities?
Well, I don't think we'll announce how we're going to use new weapons, when we're going to use them, or how we're going to use them, or even if we're going to use them before we use them. Milosevic will know when the Apaches come into the fight.
Has Milosevic shown any actions that would demonstrate his sincerity to follow the 5 conditions of NATO? Is he doing anything at all with his troops to indicate that he really wants peace?
From the best I can tell, President Milosevic has an infinite capacity to talk and no capacity to act in this regard. But with every day of airstrikes, we believe he will get closer and closer to realizing that he has no choice but to meet NATO's 5 conditions in order to end this fighting. General Wald.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
As we talked about last week, just before we took a break, the weather was supposed to be bad over the last 24 hours as it was yesterday afternoon and this morning. And you'll see this cycle now repeat itself where we have some afternoon thunderstorms and maybe a little bit of a front move through every couple of days. It will make some of the flying a little more difficult, but this should repeat itself for the next several months. Last few days we've had a lot of success, as Mr. Bacon mentioned. Over 232 different targets attacked, plus 108 forces down here. I'll just mention in this, we didn't have enough room to put them all on there, so there's 108 of these fielded forces targets in that box. On the ground, over 169 plus. You can see the tanks, artilleries, APC, armored vehicles. A lot of those over the last few days, dozens, many of them in the southwest portion of Kosovo. Continue to hammer the command and control, as well as sustainment, their air defense. We continue, I'll show some film of a couple of those today, and continue to hit their lines of communication and their bridges up here in a big way. And so over the last few days, very, very successful. This afternoon, I'll show you in a minute, the weather has cleared up and they continue to do the same type of work. And as Mr. Bacon said, his sustainment of his Army over a period of time here, it's very doubtful whether he'll have a very effective Army long term. He continues to try to fight in the southwest portion of Kosovo, and we'll continue to hit him hard there.
Well, what does 169 mean next to forces on the ground?
That means in the Kosovo area here, there are targets that aren't necessarily fixed. What we would do is go out and find a target of some sort. Charlie, that wasn't a pre-planned target, a tank, an artillery piece. Or as well, it could be some of their ammunition storage areas, some of their bunkers. Those would be the forces, fielded forces on the ground. And then the rest of these would be more of the strategic area where it's long-term sustainment, be POL production, lines of communication, things like that.
That's included in the 232?
Yeah, these are all included. The total of all these targets were 232, 169 of them fielded forces, of which in just this one box here, there are 108 of those, 169. And that just shows you it's mainly in the southwest sector of Kosovo where a lot of the activity is going on. On the humanitarian side, the movement of refugees out of Kosovo has slowed down significantly. Although still 1,500 into Macedonia over the last 48 hours. Camp Eagle, the second site, as I mentioned earlier, just to the southwest of Fear. They broke ground in that. That'll have the capacity of 10,000 refugees. And then site preparation started, as I said yesterday. They're also planning Fort Dix, if it fills up to the 4,200 capacity, a possibility of moving some refugees as they wait forward moving to private residences at a place, Fort A.P. Hill, which is south here near Williamsburg. You're probably familiar with that.
Fly into them.
I think they would probably fly into the same area at Fort Dix, possibly, but I'm not sure. They haven't made the final determination. This is just contingency planning for now. And then the International Red Cross, as Mr. Bacon said, continue to test their airdrop procedures. Several nations are still taking in refugees. Over the last few days, it's been moving quite a bit. 72,000 out of the 160,000 pledged have moved. You see some of the countries have actually taken more than they pledged, Belgium and Canada, for example. And they will continue to take refugees out of, most of those out of Macedonia and some out of Albania. Fort Dix itself, we've had 5,340 come into the United States, many of those into JFK-directed families, and then Fort Dix right now is 3,748. They're processing these folks and making sure they go to the proper neighborhoods, et cetera, where there would be some support structure for those families that move out into the different states in the United States, and there are several missions planned over the next few days. The food and shelter and medical continues to be able to support the numbers I show here. Nearly 800,000 people have for food for about 2 months, but they continue to need food, and that's being provided through the international community. Shelter is almost up to 900,000 now. No change in the total refugees or the number of camps, although I just told you that Camp Eagle will start up, and some of the other countries are starting to build some more camps too, so that'll continue to increase. Some photos over the last 24 to 48 hours, Ponikve Airfield, one of their major, they have 7 major airfields counting Podgorica and Montenegro. This one continues to be shut down. As they try to repair it, we continue to hit it. This is one end of the runway. You can see it's non-usable. This is a B-52 strike, a couple of them here. This is the other end of the runway. That's closed as well. Some of the HAZ areas here have been hit real hard where they would have hardened aircraft shelters in some of these areas you can see as well. That runway is pretty much shut. A bridge in Serbia itself, you can see the span here was taken down. That's closed. That's one of their major highway bridges over the Sava. There's 6 of them. This one's down. There's another bridge down here on the next photo I'll show you that was also attacked. It's a railroad bridge at the same area. This span's been taken down, this one's been taken down, and this one right here is taken down, so that bridge is shut. One of the transformer areas in Nice itself, you can see some of the blackened areas here where they were. This transformer switching yard has been taken down, and their electricity is, a lot of it is still out in the full of Serbia, as well as not any in Kosovo, but mainly Serbia. Belgrade transformer area, you can see a few of the areas that were hit here pretty selectively, but that's also shut down. This is a Novi Sad radio relay FM building I showed you last week where we hit it. This is the actual photo's inverted here, but this is a former building that is right here. That's gone. And you can see this major radio TV FM broadcast station is now, it's basically destroyed. Nice Army Garrison, this is one of the major VJ Army headquarters administration areas, and this was all destroyed right in here, and that's taken down. Continue to go after their petroleum storage. It's well over 50% of all their storage has been destroyed. This is Posega petroleum production in western Serbia. You can see all the tanks have been hit, and this petroleum production area here is not production, but storage is all destroyed, and the petroleum inside is gone as well. Weather as of 0100 this morning, Eastern Time. There were some high clouds covering quite a bit of the area, all the way through the Belgrade area, all the way down through Pristina, with some lower clouds below it. It wasn't looking good for flying early. This will be the projected weather through 2400 Z tomorrow. You can see that same weather we had earlier, kind of moving into the area there. There is kind of a band of clouds that moved through earlier today. This is as of 1300 Z, which was early this morning Washington time. And as you can see, it cleared out, and the area is back to outstanding flying weather again, and they're flying hard again. So you can see the type of weather they got today is excellent. Talk about their lines of communication, which would be bridges and railroad bridges and highway bridges. This is the Bari Highway Bridge in western Kosovo. Night before last with an F-16 with an LGB. You can see the bridge had been hit before in several spots, some damage. This particular bomb, you can see a pretty good chunk out here. This bomb will hit the abutment area here and actually drop that. That bridge is now closed. The Donje Turjani Highway Bridge in central Serbia, another F-16 with an LGB. This is actually the forward air controller, so you'll see his cursor moving around. He's not the one dropping the bombs, he's just talking the other ones into it. And the bombs hit this bridge on both ends. Those are 2,000-pound bombs. It's Popovic Highway Bridge, southeast Serbia, another F-16 CG with LGBs. You can see another bomb drop over to the left here. It looks like it may have missed, but he'll expand down out, and it looks like they all hit the bridge. For sustainment, petroleum storage tank in central Kosovo. Continue to take down his ability to store fuel. See just another fuel tank here in the middle of Kosovo itself. There was some fuel in that. It was destroyed. This electrical switching station in Nice, southwest Serbia. F-15E with an LGB. You can see a previous strike just above. You'll see this one hit in this area here. That's one of those switching areas I was talking about in the photo a minute ago. And these will take down their electricity for this particular facility for probably several days to weeks. Jelena Ammunition Depot, eastern Kosovo, continue to take down sustainment. So this is a strategic target here for sustainment. You can see it's bunkered. F-16 again. And there was probably quite a bit of ammo in that. There's a large secondary from it. Another ammo storage in Belgrade. This is the ammo storage depot in Belgrade itself on the outskirts. It's a hardened bunker. I showed you a picture of what happens when a bomb penetrates. You'll actually see some explosion coming out of the front of this. So there was probably something in that as well. Whatever it was is not there anymore. The integrated air defense. They continue to fire SAMs. I think last night they may have fired over a dozen surface-to-air missiles, not counting handheld. This is an SA-6 transport erector launcher underneath the cursor. And it looks like it may have landed about 2 to 3 feet long, which probably destroyed whatever was there. The next is a straight flush radar that goes with an SA. This is the SA-6 radar. It's a very important strategic radar for the Serbs. It's an AGM-130 off an F-15E electric optical bomb, 2,000-pound bomb. You can see as it gets in close, you can see the vehicle with the radar. And they're working hard to have decoys out there, but we'll hit them when they look like that. The VJ staging tunnel, another very difficult target, first of all to find, and then number 2 to hit. You'll see it better as the film runs. You can see the entrance here as you get to the angle. You can see there's a large kind of a stone wall along here. You can actually see the tunnel very well here. It's a tough shot. The bomb will be coming in from the right and goes right into the tunnel. That tunnel's shut. Towed artillery. Had a lot of success with artillery over the last few days along the southwest border of Kosovo primarily. You can see the actual supports on the artillery here from the back and the tube sticking out. -1 artillery piece. Armored vehicle, Kosovo engagement zone again. This is one of those 169 targets, Charlie. A lot of activity around this area. Direct hit, you can see some pieces of it flying off over here. This is another tank in the Kosovo engagement zone. This is not the picture of the actual tank, but it's about what it would look like. And it's next to a building here. That's been, there's no activity of other than military activity in that particular area. This bomb drops, it looks like about just a foot or two short, probably at least damaged the tank, if not destroyed it. We showed another one of these last week. This was the same night. There were 2 helicopters hit the same night. This is a different hip, if you remember the previous film. Same type of helicopter. Generally the same vicinity, but not exactly. That's another destroyed hip.
Why are you giving them out in the open?
Well, what they'll do is we catch them out there sometimes, Ivan, when they've been moving around, and the air crew are becoming, and plus the other ways of finding these things are becoming more and more familiar with the area, and then when they see change, it becomes more apparent. So it's getting more difficult for him to hide.
Can pilots actually see if there's any troops running around or running away from a missile? And when they make their reports, do they ever report they think they killed 2 soldiers or they think they killed 50 people or whatever?
It's kind of rare to actually see it. But if they do, they'll report if there were troops on the ground, if they actually saw them through their infrared.
Do you have any numbers in terms of what has been reported by pilots?
No, I don't, to tell you the truth. I haven't seen very many reports of actual. It's more difficult to see the actual people on the ground. I've seen some through Predator, not being attacked necessarily, but it's rare that you actually see the people on the ground moving around. If they're in a tank, you wouldn't see it. But it does happen sometimes. But I don't have the number for you.
You know, you continually make sort of general statements that Milosevic is not going to have much military left, that you know, at this rate, very soon there's not going to be much of a military. But can you give us any idea, what's your estimate, or what do you think, how long can he take this kind of punishment on a daily basis from NATO?
Well, I don't think I said very soon, I said eventually, but it could be very soon. I don't know what his number is. I don't know how long he can take it. If he wants to wait until he has very, very little military left, that's a very difficult thing for me to estimate for him. But if you look at all the amount of damage that's been done, and the targets that have been attacked, and the type of targets that have been attacked, and his sustainment, I think it'd be very difficult for him to replace his ammunition, to replace his petroleum storage, and of course his capacity to produce petroleum is gone. His lines of communication, there have been dozens and dozens of bridges destroyed. If you look at his artillery, today alone in tanks and artillery, it's very hard to replace all that. His SAM systems, to replace all those would be very difficult, hard to find somebody that would have that many left that he could buy them from. His integrated air defense, his command and control, all his radio relay sites, those are gone forever. So at some point he's going to have to decide, I think, how much military he thinks he has to have to defend his country, basically.
But still, at this point, it looks like from the daily briefings that this is still pretty much a target-rich environment. You're not running out of targets. How long can that go on? How long before all the obvious targets have been hit?
Well, I really don't have an estimate of that. I think you'd have to, once again, I mean, it sounds like a trite answer, but you have to ask Milosevic. We'll continue to hit his military targets until there aren't any remaining, if that's what he wants.
You referred a couple of times.
General, can you discuss whether you have indications that the Serbs have successfully found a way to replace some of their SA-7s and maybe SA-16s?
I have not heard if they've found a way to do that.
Sorry?
I have not heard that. I know people are watching to see if they have found that way, and I don't know if they have. I have not heard if they have.
You have no reports of this?
I have not heard of any. There may have been. I have not read any. I know he would probably like to, but he had, I think what he had was over 2,000, estimated 2,000 handheld SAMs. He had over 2,000 strategic SAMs. I think he's fired probably nearly 600 of the strategic SAMs that we know about. We probably don't know every one. He's probably fired the same amount of handheld. You don't see every one of those. So he probably has quite a few SAMs left. The problem is he isn't firing his SAMs in the sophisticated way he probably was at the beginning of this campaign. And when he uses his radars, it's very difficult for him because when he turns his radars on, we find them. And then when we find them, we go destroy them. So he has to work around. So I don't think he's short of SAMs per se. He fires a lot of those ballistically, and I think he'll have enough SAMs to fire ballistically for a while.
Just to follow up, you haven't had reports about any particular countries supplying them SA-7s?
I have not read any of those reports.
General, we have some reports of bombs being dropped or positions being attacked inside Albania near the Kosovo border. What exactly was going on there?
As I showed in the briefing, and probably everybody knows, the VJ MUP are mostly in Kosovo, a lot of them in the southwest corner of Kosovo, and they're trying to stop a UCK attempt to open up some lines of communication. There are a lot of VJ MUP type targets in that area, some along the border. And when we find those tanks, in this case, or artillery pieces, we'll go ahead and attack those if they're right next to the border.
Even inside Albania?
We don't plan to attack inside Albania, but that border is very ill-defined out there. We know what coordinates we're attacking. So there may be some, I've heard some indication on the TV today, I think, where they mentioned there may have been bombs dropped into Albania. If that were the case, it would have been right on the border possibly, but I don't know of any targets that we're attacking in Albania intentionally. If the VJ are along that border with their artillery or tanks, and we find them, and that's good because they are easier to find, then we'll attack them.
So the KLA is drawing this equipment of the Serbs into positions where they can be seen and targeted. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure if that's their intention, but if the VJ or MUP come out in the open and we find them, we'll attack them wherever it is.
General, you referred a couple of times to the Kosovo engagement zone. What is that exactly?
Basically, if you look at Kosovo itself, the whole province itself. It's sometimes broken up into sections. It could change on a day-to-day basis. It's where a concentration of our effort might be involved. So it would be a place where a forward air controller, there may be different sections of that Kosovo engagement zone that are broken up into other sectors where a forward air controller would go out, and that would be his area of responsibility for that day. And so he would know where to work pretty much. And also, many times, I'm not sure they're doing this now, but it's been done in the past, it's a smart idea. You send the same forward air controller generally to about the same area, so he's very familiar with it, and over time he sees things change. And so that's basically just a terminology they use, mainly from an operational perspective, to say where they're operating.
Okay, and one of the pictures, I think one of the pictures that, or one of the pieces of film that was labeled that way, you alluded to the fact there was a lot of activity, and you could see tracks of what might have been armored vehicles all over the screen. Do you know what had been happening there before the bombs were dropped?
No, I don't. I imagine they were moving equipment of some sort, whether they be towing artillery or driving tanks or whatever, but it looks like heavy equipment that wouldn't be like farming equipment. It would be more of a military type equipment.
And you're just saying the engagement zone is the target-rich area, target-rich area.
That's right. Matter of fact, all of Kosovo, all of the FRI is basically an engagement zone. But then the Kosovo engagement zone, as I said earlier, is broken up into sectors operationally. I won't tell you exactly where they are, but the forward air controllers would be sent out to those engagement zones, and that would be where you would work for that particular day. Barbara?
General Wald, to what extent at this point is the air campaign specifically aiding and helping the KLA? And does intensification of the air campaign also carry with it an estimate or an assessment that collateral damage is going to increase?
Well, as far as helping the UCK, it's, as I said earlier, totally consequential and a coincidence, really. I mean, that is not our primary objective. Our objective is to destroy the VJ MUP Army, and we'll continue to do that. If that benefits the UCK, then it's consequential. I mean, frankly, it's the fact that the UCK is becoming stronger, it appears, or at least they're fighting back, is a consequential benefit as well. And as far as the collateral damage, we don't plan for any increase in collateral damage. We never plan for that would be crazy for us to even put that in the planning factor. The fact of the matter is, since the beginning of the operation, we've said there'd be risk involved both on the ground and in the air. There's continuous risk in the air to the pilots. There'll be risk on the ground that damage could occur around a target area. But the NATO pilots and their planning factors are working extremely hard to ensure the targets they hit are exactly the targets they want, and they hit it where they should. But, once again, as you increase your sorties, the likelihood, not in the percentage factor, but overall, could increase. If you increase sorties and you increase bombing, it'll be probably relative terms to that, maybe an increase. But I think the fact of the matter is, when you look at the fact that they've flown 30,000 sorties now, they've dropped nearly 20,000 bombs, and they've had a handful of incidents where those incidents you're talking about have occurred. It's probably way beyond what anybody could have ever expected to be from the standpoint of success.
Can I follow up on the question of the KLA? Just wanted to think about that picture. The tank tracks, or whatever they were, seemed to be going in all different directions. I mean, to a layman, it looked like that was a battlefield, that there had been a battle there. It wasn't like a bunch of trucks moving in a straight line someplace and all leaving the same.
I don't have any indication that was a battle or there had been any contact in the misrep from that particular target. We didn't see that they had witnessed contact, if that's what you're getting at.
General, could you incorporate again in your daily briefings the number of sorties and the number of strike sorties? It's helpful to us if we could just get your hands on that.
I'll give you an update tomorrow.
General, you say any bombing that takes place that helps the KLA is consequential. Are they in contact in any way with our people when they're on the attack and they suddenly run into a large force and relaying that information back to us?
Are you mean through the KAOC or some? No, not that I know of.
Could you explain why politically or militarily you don't want to coordinate with them? Because it seems like if it'll boost NATO effectiveness and get more.
Well, we went into this with an objective, and I think it's been lost many times. The objective for the NATO airstrikes, as simple as it sounds, is very important. That's to degrade the MUP VJ Army.
But if you degrade them better by coordinating with KLA, why not do that? Could you explain that?
Because that's not our mission. our mission is to degrade the VJ MUP military. As simple as it sounds and as hard as it is to understand, that's really the fact. If the UCK becomes stronger and they are taking out VJ MUP military, that's a consequence that is beneficial to us, I believe. But we are not there coordinating with the KLA to try to help them fight the war.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that that would be why you would coordinate with them to help the KLA, but if it helps NATO, why not? I mean, it seems very, all's fair in love and war, why not coordinate with them? There's got to be a political or military reason that's escaping
I think the
me.
military has learned lessons over time.
Yes, please.
First of all, we do what we're told. And our job is to do the mission, and we're glad to do it. And in this case, the mission, very simply, is to degrade the military. And that's very hard for a lot of people to come to grips with, because there's the same story that people say, well, you're always fighting the old war. You always fight the last war. This is not the last war. This is different. This is a circumstance that people haven't seen before. And I think the way that General Clark and his people are executing this mission is outstanding. And I think after all said and done, they'll come across, this will be looked at as a success. But it's a different circumstance that most people aren't used to. Many people in the military aren't used to this type of thing. But I think exactly what the mission is, we're executing it in an outstanding way.
General, up until a moment ago, from that podium, ever since you've been there, you have talked about the objective has been to degrade. But a couple minutes ago, you used the word destroy. Was that a slip on you?
No, I meant that intentionally. By degrading the military, we're going to destroy his equipment. It's a euphemism, if you want, for the same word.
General Wald, military viewpoint, can you comment now, after 1 week, congressional report on Chinese espionage, how much damage has been done to the United States military and how much they have stolen, including the neutron technology, neutron bomb technology, and several members of Congress are calling several resignations, including Mr. Sandy Berger and Attorney General.
This is clearly a question for Mr. Bacon.
Well, I was asking actually if you have seen in your 30 years of military service anything like this.
27 years. No.
27 years.
No.
The CIA did an assessment back in April. I think it was released on April 21st, that analyzed the impact that the espionage had on the Chinese forces, and said that it had not been able to detect deployments that had sprung directly from the espionage that was studied by the Cox Commission. Obviously, the government is still looking into this, but that's the definitive ruling from our government so far on this. I think that many people have spoken on this. Secretary Richardson is now looking into the question of whether there should be discipline of people within his department, and that study by Secretary Richardson is ongoing. Yes?
Mr. Bacon, I just follow, if you can clarify now, after 60 days of India and Pakistan conflict over on the Kashmir border, if Secretary Cohen has spoken from the Pentagon military viewpoint, either with either of the prime ministers or defense ministers on this conference, if the Pentagon is worried about this, because one of the spokesmen in Pakistan said, if there is a war between India and Pakistan, Pakistan will use any weapon available. That means they have nuclear weapons also, India and Pakistan now.
The United States government, through the State Department, has been in contact with both India and Pakistan and appealed to them to show restraint in the Jammu and Kashmir area. This is not a new position on the part of the government. We've been appealing to both India and Pakistan for years, decades really, to try to resolve this problem and to find a solution that stops short of the type of combat that's been going on over the last several days and weeks. This is a highly volatile area. It's been made more dangerous and volatile by the fact that both countries have been testing missiles and nuclear weapons, nuclear devices, I should say, over the last year or so. It's highly serious, and we see it as serious. The United States believes that it's up to India and Pakistan to resolve this long festering border issue, and we have offered to provide assistance in any reasonable way we can. I think our position on that's been extremely clear and has not changed. All that has changed is the urgency of trying to achieve a peaceful solution in light of the conflict that's sprung up recently. Yes.
Ken, in light of the, we've got diplomatic efforts underway now. Notice General Wald's chart, the weather went all the way to September. Do you have a cutoff date, a cutoff time, a rough time, June, July, somewhere in there, where you have to understand that things aren't working out and you have to start planning on winterizing troops, winterizing refugees?
The first answer is no. There is no cutoff. I think it's clear. We've been going for 10 weeks. We're prepared to go for another 10 weeks and another 10 weeks beyond that. There are plenty of targets still to hit, and I think we've shown that we will continue to seek out and attack those targets aggressively. Second, in terms of winterization, there are no artificial deadlines for this campaign. General McDuffie said when he spoke here on Friday that winterization is included in the contracts for the camps that the United States is building now in Albania. It's always been part of that, and we will winterize the camps as appropriate. And I think that even if there were a peace agreement tomorrow or next week, it's not reasonable to assume that every refugee would return home instantly, and some may end up in Macedonia or Albania through the winter. So winterization is something that has to be done. My assumption is that the refugees will go back as they find the environment in Kosovo safe and secure, and they'll go back when they have places to live, and that may take some time.
One more on the KLA seems to be getting stronger, and as you said, the recent fighting has been to open lines of communication. How closely have we been monitoring the amount of arms that they've been getting, and what types for kind of a general disarmament if a peace agreement ever takes place?
Well, we're monitoring it the best we can. Admiral Wilson spoke about this some the other day, the fact that they are gathering strength when he was here on Thursday. They still are not acquiring in significant numbers the types of heavy weaponry they need to fight the Serb forces as effectively as they'd like to do. They are getting more and more weapons. They are getting heavier weapons, but it is still an imbalance, both in terms of people and in terms of weaponry. To the extent that NATO was successful in taking down the Serb forces, that balance is being equalized, but it's not equal at this stage, but it's being equalized quite quickly, I would say, particularly in the area of artillery. A little less rapidly in the area of tanks and APCs, but it's being equalized there as well.
The KLA's been trying to open up a second line of communication. Do you know if they've been successful there?
They have not yet been successful. There is fairly ferocious fighting going on over that second line of communication. There have been heavy casualties on both sides, and they continue to work to try to open up a second entry point into Kosovo. I think it's too early to predict how that will turn out, except that they clearly are putting more assets into the fight. Yes.
To India and Pakistan, just for a moment, is there any evidence that the Indian fighter jet that was shot down was brought down by U.S.-made Stinger missiles?
Not that I'm aware of.
Does Pakistan have U.S. Stinger missiles? Do you know?
We, yes, Pakistan does. We have not sold any Stingers to Pakistan for probably 5 years or more. But obviously Pakistan has left over from the war in Afghanistan. There are quite a number of Stingers. I mean, there are a number of Stingers in the area.
Do you know any rough idea how many Stingers that Pakistan may have in its inventory?
I would guess several hundred, but I don't know that specifically.
And one last question about Stingers. There's been some reports in the press in recent years that some of these Stingers that were introduced into Afghanistan back in the 80s may not really be operable anymore because of their the short life of their batteries or whatever. Do you know if that's the case, or are all these Stingers that are still out there in operating condition, or is there some reason to believe that many of them or most of them don't operate?
I have absolutely no way to comment on that. Yes.
Could you take a crack at my question? And I'm really not trying to be difficult. I do want to understand why.
You're telling me that General Wald didn't answer the question adequately?
Why politically? What would be so bad about coordinating with them? What's the disadvantage? Is there some fear of how the United States or how NATO would be regarded after, or is there some sense you don't want to take responsibility if KLA gets slaughtered? What is it?
It is clear that NATO and the KLA share a common interest, and that interest is to shatter the forces of the Serb military and special police in Kosovo. But we are pursuing those interests separately, and we will continue to pursue them separately.
And the why question is what I'm trying to get at. Why?
The interests, as I say, conform. The KLA is very public about what it's doing. NATO is quite public about what it's doing. I think it's easy for both sides to figure out what's going on. Yes.
Ken, just one last one on K4. Is the military committee going to come up strictly with a recommendation for K4, or is it also going to come up with a recommendation for a force, since it's studying the issue also, come up with a recommendation of the force to be inserted under possibly a non-permissive environment, and will countries also make contingency offers for that?
No.
This is strictly K4 this week.
They are looking at K4. That's what's on the table, K4.
Tell us where exactly this fairly ferocious fighting is going on between the KLA and the Serb forces?
It's near the, I'll have to look at the, look at a map. I can't remember the name of it, but I can get you the name of that. Yeah.